Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to all of our listeners across the country and around the world. This is episode 329, another special Ask David on a really interesting topic with our very special guest, Matt May. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Rhonda. Hey, David. Great to see you both again.
Good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you, Matt.
It's been a long time since we last talked. Like about 30 minutes.
30 minutes ago, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I love our topic for today.
And this came in as a question. I don't know if we have a copy of it from a listener, but I think he was suggesting that he or she for an Ask David, but we decided to make a whole podcast because it was such a good question.
Do you want to say what it is?
No, it's secret.
We could just talk about it.
It was on the topic of how do you deal with a narcissist.
Nice. Yes. I think this is a topic that a lot of people are beginning to be curious about because I've heard that word thrown about a lot. Narcissist. Oh, this guy's a narcissist or that woman's a narcissist. And that's really about being in relationships. And the endorsement that I want to read is also about relationships. And so shall I read that now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, David. Thank you for looking at my relationship journal and your suggestions about how I could improve. Your suggestions sounded so great and are touching all of the right spots. I would definitely feel validated if I would hear something like what you wrote. You know, sometimes when my partner and I talk, the 5 secrets are the last thing that come to my mind. And when I actually remember about them, I sometimes don't even want to use them because I don't want to find any truth in what he says. Instead, I want to be the poor, innocent victim that is being picked on. And I do realize I make everything worse by being stubborn and insisting on my right to feel hurt, angry, insulted instead of using good communication skills. My biggest problem is that I react really sensitively and defensively. When my partner and I have a discussion or if I go to him for a talk, I'm already armed up to my teeth with defensive weapons, because I feel I cannot stand up to him anyway, and I will just go under and drown. And because I react so defensively, it seems to provoke my partner to insist even more stronger on his points. And so our discussions don't go anywhere and just leave 2 wounded, hurt, lonely people. But now I have decided to stop doing that and to start using the 5 secrets again and really listen to what my partner has to say and take him seriously. I might not hit it all the time, but I will get better at it every time I do my best. Thank you, David, for all of your help, insight, and support. Warmly, and this is from Carolyn.
Well, thank you for that beautiful note, Carolyn. I sent it to Rhonda because I was just so excited. I wish I could get notes like that from many more people because that, Carolyn, you're speaking to the human condition that we want to all feel like victims and be angry and be hurt and get defensive. And you just described it so beautifully and your courage. I think you read my book, Feeling Good Together, which is about conflict and the 5 secrets of effective communication, and decided to look at your own role when you filled out a relationship journal and suddenly opened your eyes to why you were in this logjam with the person you love. And I was just so incredibly proud of you and appreciate that that note that shows such warmth, such brilliant intelligence, but also humility, and what I sometimes talk about is the third death of the self, the blaming, entitled, angry self. And instead of looking outward to the world and putting the blame on the other person, you take a look at your own role in the conflict, and you suddenly see what you're doing that's propagating it. And equally important, if you can endure looking at your own role, what you can do to change things around. And so I know, Carolyn, you've been looking for an answer for a long time, and I think you have hit the nail on the head, and I'm very, very proud of you and very happy for you.
Wow, David, that's so beautiful. I mean, that was so lucky of her to write to you and have you take the time to respond to her. It made such a big difference for her.
Yeah, she suffered tremendously for a long time, and it just makes my heart sing when somebody suddenly finds the key to their distress and finds something to do about it. But interpersonal problems are much tougher than ordinary depression and anxiety. They take much more courage to face them and to look at your own role and to change yourself. It's so much harder than being angry and blaming someone else or blaming the world.
I loved your response to Caroline, David. That warmed my heart, and I saw a lot of common features in Caroline and myself, so I could really relate to where she's coming from and see her wisdom, and was glad she was so vulnerable there. And that's a beautiful story. She read Feeling Good Together, and that was part of what helped her see that she was creating her loneliness. And
yes, and also even more than that, it was kind of, she unearthed, I think, a hidden emotion that was triggering a lot of other symptoms, that she had trouble shaking, depression and anxiety and obsessions and panic attacks. And she tried a lot of things that gave a little help, but didn't really blow the thing out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And often when people get stuck, particularly with anxiety, it's because there's a hidden emotion. And this was a case where the emotion wasn't so hidden, but I think the patient was consciously censoring it and saying, I shouldn't be feeling this way, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then it's scary sometimes to open up and be real when you've been hiding your feelings for so long, for so many years.
Yeah.
Because, so taking the opposite question on the continuum is talking about narcissism, when someone is only focused on their own needs. So shall we move on to our topic?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have that email, do we, from the person?
No.
Narcissism? I
don't think so.
Okay.
So the first thing we decided to do was, what's the definition of a narcissistic personality disorder?
Yeah. So I just tried to answer that great question. I wish we knew who it was. If I can find the email later, we'll thank them on a subsequent podcast. But I just put some questions down so we'd have a structure for our podcast, like what is narcissism? What causes narcissism? How do you deal with someone who's narcissistic? Questions. How do you treat somebody who's narcissistic? Things that might be of interest to the general public, because most of us know someone who's narcissistic, and you might sense narcissism in yourself too, and want to know what to do about it. I don't have that problem, but a lot of other people do. and how you treat them, how you communicate with them, how you and I just think it's a fascinating topic, and maybe not one that's covered too frequently. So, okay, what guys and ladies, or guy and lady, what's the definition of narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder, or what are narcissistic traits?
Well,
I'll dive in here if you don't want to, Rhonda.
We could. Why don't you start? You take the first dive.
Okay, yeah. So narcissism is it's called a personality disorder, and so it's a consistent pattern of behavior and way of thinking and relating to other people. That's actually quite tragic. It tends to really be upsetting to other people because when narcissism means that you have this sort of inflated sense of your own importance, and it comes along with a sense of entitlement to special treatment, and so folks who suffer from narcissism tend to interact in the world in ways that really piss other people off, and they tend to lose friends and be kind of alone in the world. And then they miss out on, of course, closeness and warmth and the experience of living and breathing and dying here on planet Earth, just among us mortals, in order to keep alive a fantasy of their specialness, and hurt themselves and hurt the people around them in the process of doing that. That would be part of the definition. There's a very, crystal clear definition in the DSM, but I would maybe start there, and we could build upon that.
God, Matt, I love your empathy and how you said that it's a tragedy. It's tragic to be a narcissist or to have a narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah, I think
it's because they're suffering.
Yeah, they're desperately needing approval and affection from the outside and caring and praise, but they're going about getting that in ways that are very short term. And maybe they'll get some attention, but they won't form real meaningful, deep kinds of relationships, trusting, warm relationships. They tend to burn bridges with people.
I think you guys are doing beautifully, but let me be a partially dissenting voice because narcissism tends to work in a way, and a lot of people who are narcissistic are getting a tremendous amount of adulation, and it can be effective in some ways, and it might be a tragedy from within our point of view that they're missing out on some of life's most precious, vulnerable moments of closeness and intimacy, but they're from their point of view, they might be on a kind of a cocaine high much of the time, especially if the narcissism is working for them. And so they wouldn't be typically coming to us for help. Yes. And we can think of some political figures who probably, love being narcissistic, or sports figures or entertainers who, they get a lot of adulation and admiration and fans, dedicated fans who follow them, and in some cases would give their lives for these individuals.
That's an excellent point, David. I agree with that wholeheartedly. There's a reason why people with narcissistic personality disorder are actually difficult to treat. One is it probably feels good psychologically to imagine that you're special and powerful and deserve more, etc. But then if you can persuade people and people start to buy into that, and they get kind of hypnotized by your sense of your own specialness, then yeah, they can feel great, powerful, get more money, and all of these types of rewards. And I would say, I was just pointing at the downside, is that, but there's not going to be a real friendship. Real friend. They might have people who are kind of supporting them as fans, but don't really know them. And
they see people as objects, not as suffering real human beings.
And when you say objects, do you mean objects that serve their need?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or objects that don't serve their needs, in which case the objects become enemy type objects. I have a question for you both, and there's probably no good answer to it, but in the DSM turns a lot of things into disorders that are not disorders. I don't have great respect for the DSM as a clinical tool. It has some value as a research tool, but not so much as a clinical tool. But the practical question would be, do you see narcissism as a trait that exists in varying degrees from 0 to 100%, you might say, on a bell-shaped curve in the population? And so some people are just really high on this trait that we all have to some extent. Or do you see it as a disorder that's qualitatively different and not just, the top of some continuum of traits that all human beings share?
Well, going back to what you were starting to say, Matt, I mean, there's some really great benefits to being narcissistic if it's a continuum, if you're thinking about it as a continuum, and the part of like feeling good about yourself and believing in your self-importance and, those kinds of, and, having a need for attention and feeling special. I mean, if you can challenge that, if you can channel that into, work or school or parenting where you're, you're being the best that you can be and believing in yourself.
So there's a positive side to narcissism. There's a healthy and an unhealthy narcissism, which is a great point that you made. And a lot of American society is based on, self-esteem. Some baloney guy wrote a book called 10 Days to Self-Esteem. He sold thousands of copies of it. But one of the points of the book was that there's no such thing as self-esteem. And, but there is this push to be special. And we see this even among people in our Tuesday training group. And I'm sure in your training groups also, Matt, that most mental health professionals carry a lot of shame thinking they're not special enough or good enough and that they have to be special. But to come back to my question that neither of you has addressed, do you think that narcissism
That's a great question.
is just a trait that we all share in varying degrees, or do you think it's a qualitatively different thing like a disorder? Like we don't think of pneumonia as being just a extension of normal lungs. We think of it as a distinctly abnormal illness.
I don't know for sure, David. I've heard some people. There were therapists. I think Kohut was one who thought that narcissism was a normal part of our development. And for example, in children, there's a lot of need for attention and affection, and and to feel. And they have all these fantasies of being superheroes and things like that. And so that seems like kind of a normal part of life. And I think the issue is that if that just continues for your whole life, I think but then I think we could also make the argument, well, who's trying to decide how people should be and who gets to decide what's normal or abnormal? And I think that's a hard question to answer too. But certainly there are pros and cons of these different ways of approaching life and thinking and feeling and behaving. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Now, what's the difference between narcissism and malignant narcissism?
That one, I'm not so sure. Is that sort of narcissism? We've all got some narcissism, but malignant would be we act in ways that hurt people.
Well, this is something I actually got out of DSM, and I thought it was pretty good. But yes, that's the distinction that you've got narcissistic personality disorder, but then you've got malignant narcissism, which is even worse, and that's like political leaders or cult leaders who, they're really almost on a psychotic level about how great and important they are, and their insensitivity and cruelty to anyone who crosses them. They'll kill you. Saddam Hussein was, laughing as his sons pushed political enemies off the roof so that, watch them fall to the ground 2 or 3 stories below and die, and worse. And
right.
and it's the thing of the narcissist is I don't like to be crossed. I don't like to be criticized. And the malignant narcissist is one who says, and if you do disagree with me or try to cross me, I'll kill you. I'll murder you. I'll get revenge.
And retribution.
And so that's that kind of going into the psychotic realm, except, in a way their psychosis works, because Trump, I wouldn't want to call him narcissistic or anything, but he does have millions and millions of followers. There's something attractive about narcissists to certain kinds of human beings, and so they're powerful and they're all knowing, and cult leaders seem to have the answer for everything, but there's always this dark side that's being hidden, like Jim Jones, and he's suddenly, killing all of his followers. And same the Waco, Texas guy, and nearly all of these people end up in some kind of violent conflagration. But let's get back to practical things. You said that narcissism is difficult to treat. I would say that narcissism is the easiest disorder I've ever had to treat.
I'd love to hear about that. You'll have to share your secrets with me.
Well, should I say it first, or yeah? Well, I'll tell you. See, I gave this workshop in Oregon, and I gave I always have these dramatic vignettes illustrating rapid recovery to make some point or other, and so I had this great vignette, and I was very proud, and then some person in the audience, probably I was being narcissistic or arrogant or something, but she really felt the need to put me down. And in the Q&A, she said, she said that wasn't a successful treatment. That was a failure. You didn't treat his narcissism. And I think it was a workshop on shyness or something like that. I can't even remember, but she was so angry about that, and so kind of arrogant. So I must have done something that pissed her off. But essentially, you see, she is taking the position, and this is why I left the psychodynamic, psychoanalytic kind of focus that I had in my training as a resident, that somehow she's an expert who knows how people shouldn't and should not be. That's what you referred to, a few minutes ago. And I see that kind of as a form of arrogance, that we know what's a correct way for a human being to be and an incorrect way. And we all have our preferences. But in developing team therapy, that was one of the key points of my own personal growth, I hope, is giving up this idea that I'm the expert. And I was trained to believe that, who knows what's right and wrong for how people should be. And so the reason that I've always had tremendous ease treating narcissists is, first, I'm one myself. And so, I love narcissists and I let them know. I use a lot of stroking during the empathy phase, a lot of disarming. And I play into what they have, and then I let them set the agenda. What do they want help with? And if they like me, if they sense that I like them, they're very hardworking, and they've been just super excellent patients and can generally accomplish their goals. But my expectations for them are very limited. It's to solve the problem, maybe a marital conflict or a conflict at work, or some problem with their career, or some problem they want help with, and then I try to use cognitive techniques, externalization of voices, to to help them with self-critical thoughts, or 5 secrets of effective communication, to help them with relationships with others, whatever the problem is that they want help with. But I'm not trying to tell them that, they have to get over their narcissism. If you see what I mean. Similarly, if someone comes to me with OCD, I don't see it as my job to cure them of OCD, because they might not want treatment for OCD. They might treatment for help with their relationship with their son or daughter or partner or something like that. So it's the whole, agenda setting aspect of team therapy that has made it easy for me to treat people with narcissism or anything, because I let the patient set the agenda. I don't know if we've still got you, Matt. You look a bit frozen.
Oh, I can hear you fine.
You're not frozen now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, can I ask you a question? This is kind of a simple question, but when people come to therapy, they're talking about themselves. They're talking about themselves because that's why they're coming to therapy. And we say that narcissists are people who are, have sort of this grandiose sense of their own self-importance. So they're also talking about themselves. So how can you tell the difference between just an average therapy patient who is talking about themselves versus a narcissist, a patient who has narcissism and a grandiose sense of themselves?
Well, I think Matt did a great job of answering that at this top of this workshop. Is what are the symptoms of narcissism, and they're pretty obvious. We could repeat them again.
We could also do examples, like what would be an example of that type of behavior, and
yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I had one example, and I think, David, you had an example too. Do you want to go first?
Mine is how to get along with them in the real world, not a treatment example.
Oh,
I just remembered something. Often people teach in the area that they're weakest in personally.
Oh, yeah.
Like you go to famous shrinks and they specialize in X, Y, or Z, and they do workshops and so forth. And I wanted to go to this workshop. Some famous guy was offering a workshop on the treatment of narcissism. And so I thought, well, I don't know much about that. I'll go to it. And the guy came in. He was wearing kind of a tuxedo, and his nails were professionally done. And I think he was dropped off with a chauffeur-driven Rolls Royce, type of thing. I just wanted to throw that out there. But anyway,
it seems like he was maybe looking for a lot of attention from other people.
Yeah.
Maybe he suffered from narcissism himself.
Yeah, well, and more power to him if he's focusing his life on that, because that, there is some considerable suffering that can be involved.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is most narcissists are really missing out on something much better than whatever they're getting that feels like cocaine.
Yeah.
But, I like your point there, David. I wanted to just underscore it, that it's often the therapist's own narcissism and that comes into conflict with someone else's narcissism. So if we think we know better than they do, and try to get them to change, that will create resistance in them.
Yeah.
And I appreciated your identification of this idea of therapeutic narcissism, that if the therapist thinks that they know how that person's supposed to end up, then the therapy is not going to go very well.
Yeah, that's the biggest cause of therapeutic failure, is imposing your agenda on the patient rather than listening and forming an empathic relationship, and then see what the patient wants help with. And more often than not, it's fairly easily delivered, especially if the patient likes and respects you. And that's why I think it's so important to use stroking and disarming during the empathy phase. But I think it's hard to do that because a lot of people, they get so pissed off at someone who's narcissistic, they're trying to contradict them and trying to put them down and, feeling really angry with them.
Right.
But I always felt very tender toward patients I treated who were extremely narcissistic.
Yeah. That's wonderful that you had those close feelings with them. I mean, tender feelings towards them. I sometimes get pissed off at narcissists because I'll have this thinking that they should treat me well, like everyone should treat me with respect all the time.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's like asking a giraffe to fly.
Exactly. And I've had to let go of that thought if I notice it coming up.
And also, do you also sometimes have the feeling that, well, I'm special too. Like, I'm important in this relationship. You're not the only important one.
Well, right. That's why you get into trouble trying to relate to a narcissist, is hoping. That's one of the errors in trying to relate to a narcissist is having the fantasy that they're going to care about you and show an interest in you, or that you're going to change them in some way. I have a little vignette, a story to tell, and I might have told it before, but I'm so old and demented now that people say, oh, well, he has no memory left, which is true. So, but when my son was little, we're always trying to help our kids and learn how to get along in the world. And he had this, and we were living in Gladwin, Pennsylvania, but we had, the cheapest house in the fanciest neighborhood. And so the people around us were pretty, wealthy and so forth. And Erik had this friend over, and his father was the head of some garment type of company that was syndicated nationally. So that they were just rolling in money. They had stores all over the United States. And the little boy, when he would come over to play, would say things, like to show how important he was. And, Melanie and I saved up our money, and we got this beautiful piano that we proudly displayed in our living room. And when he looked at it, he says, oh, I see you have a nice black piano. We have one at our house too, but it's, I don't know what the issue is, but it's twice as big as yours. And I think it's, and then he'd say, the manufacturer, and this is from Carnegie Hall or something, some type of deal like that. And he kept putting us down constantly. And I was supposed to take them to a movie at the King of Prussia Mall. I was getting sucked in, but I didn't realize I was getting sucked in. I said, I've got to show this kid that, I'm important too. So when we went past the Dalton's bookstore on the way to the movie theater, I said, why don't we go in here and look around? My book, Feeling Good, just made the New York Times bestseller list, and they probably got it on display. And here, I figure this is going to impress them. And he says, oh, yes, my father just bought this whole chain of Dalton's bookstores nationwide. I own this store. I got so pissed off. And it was just frustrating and irritating. But I was playing this game of, getting angry at this kid and thinking somehow I had to impress him. And then I thought about it and told Erik, here's the error that I'm making. And I said that the only thing that's going to work with him is like stroking and disarming type of thing. And I explained it. And then the next time the little boy came over to play, he would say things like, I just got a hit in baseball. And I'd say, oh, I heard about that. And it's fantastic. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're playing for the Philadelphia Phillies, pro baseball one of these days. And, he got so excited and so happy. And whatever he said, I just kind of disarmed him and stroked him. And you could say, well, that was cruel, that you were manipulating him. You weren't forming a genuine relationship. And that's my whole message is that's the way you relate to a narcissist. You manipulate them. And you play the game that they're playing, and you give up on the idea of having a warm, close, loving relationship with them. And then a lot of listeners are going to say, oh, Burns, I'm never going to listen to your podcast again. That's so horrible to what you said. but sometimes I think that something inside you has to die in order to relate to certain kinds of people. And anyway, that's my thinking. You both may be hating me right now, but Melanie did this also. She ran into a very narcissistic, internationally famous person who was supposed to supervise her in her PhD program, and she didn't like. She can see through people instantly, even better than I can. And I'm paranoid, so I see through almost everybody. But she just flattered him and didn't take him seriously. I guess she got used to living with narcissists, having been married to me. and so she just skillfully got herself switched to a different supervisor. And without, bothering the waters, without, making any problems. And I thought that was super awesome, what she did. But I think most people wouldn't do that. They get into arguments with the narcissist, or get into gossiping about them behind their back, and, playing the role of victim. But anyway, that's just a thought I had, but it's been very helpful to me, because that little boy, I mean, he became a fan of ours rather than, trying to impress us all the time. And he was very, very grateful for the
praise and
catering to him a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe he was lonely, like what you thought, Matt,
Yeah, you're going back to Matt's original statement that someone who suffers from narcissism deserves our empathy, because it's a tragic life where they're missing out on closeness when they're desperately needing the affection.
Yeah.
Could I share a story that I don't think it's an example of very graceful handling of narcissism? But I did learn something from it.
Cool. Yeah. Tell us.
So I was at a music concert, and it was late, and I was standing in line at I'd lost something. And I was standing in line at the Lost and Found, and I saw three young men, kind of college-aged men, cut in front of the line. And it was a long line, and it had, people there, I think, who had been waiting a long time and may have needed help more urgently. But I asked them, I said, why did you do that? Why did you cut in line? And I started up a conversation with them. And the fascinating story it's similar to yours, David, is that this fellow said, well, my dad's a very wealthy man, and he works on Wall Street making big deals. And when he comes home at night, he tells me that he knows that he's the smartest and best person, because he's able to manipulate and basically cheat people out of their wealth. And I want to be just like my dad when I grow up. And I ended up having like about an hour-long conversation with this fellow. And I did say, when we got to the front of the line, I said, I'm sorry, I wouldn't serve these three gentlemen because they didn't wait in the line. And they were kind of pissed off at me. And I said, but I had to say that because it wouldn't be fair to everyone else. And I care about all these people, and I care about you. But I'd like to hear more about what it's been like for you to grow up, and what your plans are. And I expressed that it would be hard for me to connect with them and trust them and have a warm relationship with them because of this attitude that they want to swindle people and prove that they're smarter. But I wish them well in life, and went on my way.
That's really neat.
Oh, thanks.
Wow, Matt, that's amazing that you would spend an hour talking with them.
My ego is feeling great now. Thank you for the compliment.
But you still stayed with your integrity and what your sense of right and wrong, while listening to them and not making them wrong or feel like they then now had to attack you.
Right. Yeah. It seemed to work out okay. I was offended that they would get in line and take other people. They didn't have any kind of medical problem or anything like that.
Yeah.
And
because
I thought it was sad that was the sort of lesson that they were learning at home. But,
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the world these days.
I mean,
a lot of aggression and bullying and
yeah.
violence and war and hatred and we're good, you're bad, seeing people in black and white categories. It's very frightening and very dispiriting.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you when I encounter a lot of narcissistic traits in somebody, I do feel kind of frightened and scared of them and want to avoid them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm afraid that they're going to come out and attack me at some point if I get tired of stroking or disarming or want some more of an equal relationship. I'm worried that then they're going to retaliate if they're not getting their needs met. So I'd rather not be in a relationship with them.
Absolutely.
David, did you want to talk about the manipulative component of narcissism?
Well, yeah, people will think I'm adult, but I've heard this, people with this diagnosis or that diagnosis can be very manipulative. And I never figured out what it meant. You hear these, I just thought it was kind of a disparaging word, a general put down word. And then it was just a few weeks ago, I was interacting with someone I don't remember, but I realized that I just represented a thing to this person that he or she wanted to manipulate. In other words, what really didn't have any genuine interest in me, but because I have a small degree of celebrity, is just wanting to use me as a pawn in their own system of self-esteem. When we do work with our students and with our patients, and we see the amazing beauty of vulnerability and just being an ordinary person and being able to be close to people and to have feelings and to not be having to impress people or to use people, that's the opposite of manipulation. But I think the narcissist is, looking to use people as objects of adulation. And it is a very, very narrow and superficial view of human beings. But I think they don't even realize that they're doing this, and they don't even glimpse some alternative way of being. Let's see, we had a bunch of questions. Let me see if we've covered all of them. Let's see. What do we think about, what are the causes of narcissism?
Well, isn't it true there's not just one cause of narcissism, but there could be quite a few causes?
Yeah, definitely.
Like what I've always found, and Matt, maybe you could correct me, Matt and David, it's, some people think it's genetic. Some people think it's early childhood abuse or neglect. Or or parents who are or grandiose in their praise of their child.
Yeah, I think there's probably merit to both those theories. Some nature, some nurture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one reason I feel some sadness for folks in this camp, because they didn't choose it. They didn't choose either of those features. But I can see a scenario where at home, if their children are not getting much attention, they might have to fantasize more, and they might fantasize and get kind of addicted to this idea of specialness and that kind of thing, rather than getting out and playing with other kids and making other friendships and seeing how wonderful that is compared to a fantasy. And so maybe David, your interaction with this young fellow, Erik's friend, may have kind of helped him not become quite as much of a narcissist to
Yeah.
just let him have what he needed there and to go where he was. That's amazing empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I think everyone is familiar with the fact that if people are successful, they may become narcissistic because of their success. And that can happen, at any time in your life. Like if you're, an NBA player, then you get a $50 million a year contract. It's hard not to think that you're special. And then people around you get to where they won't contradict you.
Mm.
And then you get surrounded by yes people. And so that kind of feeds on narcissism as well. We see that right now in politics, that the Republicans are afraid to speak up against Trump because they realize he has tremendous power, because he has tens of millions of followers. And so, Trump doesn't hear a lot of contradiction of himself or people speaking truth to power. And I'm sure that even the people around him try to guide him to, positive reviews and positive news that further feeds his narcissism, because that's the way you would gain favor with him. And I don't mean to be overly critical of Trump or anyone, but I think he does have very strong narcissistic tendencies. I think I'm kind of narcissistic myself, and it's been a thorn in the flesh, but it's also been rewarding. I can remember when I was a psychiatric resident doing my research. I wanted to do this research on brain chemistry, and my supervisor said, "Oh, that's impractical. Do a mainstream kind of research project," and that pissed me off. And so I said to myself, "No, I'm going to show him. I'm going to do something really great." And then I was reading this research paper that came out of the National Institute of Mental Health on brain chemistry, and I said that I don't think that article is properly done, and I think I could do better. And then as I was doing my research, I was telling myself, I think this is going to be the greatest research paper in the world, type of thing, which is kind of grandiose. But I was saying, I've looked at all of this literature, and there's nothing that compares with the kind of thing that I'm doing. And I got some great people on my research team and to collaborate with, and and I couldn't stand it when things weren't coming out right. I would drive myself tremendously. And then lo and behold, I got the top award. It was my first research paper, and I got the top award in the world for an investigator under 35 years of age doing basic brain research. And I was competing with neurochemists and neurophysiologists from all around the world. So it did, it did pay off. And then once I got that award, people were, saying, "Oh, will you come to our medical school? We need a department chairman." I said, "I don't know anything about politics or department chairman. All I know about is mathematical modeling or type of thing." But it was, it does feed on itself, which is probably trivial what I'm saying, because everyone is aware of this. But that's one of the things that our culture rewards narcissism. At the same time, the narcissist is always fearful of shame and feeling like you've got to be special, and if you're not special enough, or if your territory is threatened, you feel ashamed. And I've felt those feelings as well, and that's one of the reasons why I love working with a Rhonda, with a Matt, with a Joe Levitt, and with so many beautiful people who have taught me the beauty of humility and just being and sharing your feelings and not having to earn, the love of other people. I'm just babbling away.
Well, what you're saying is I'm loving this story about your research project, because you're giving a positive part of narcissism. Like, you really believed in yourself. You really believed that you had something to contribute. Yeah. And you really believed in yourself so much that you went against the wishes of your supervisor and did what you wanted to do. And that drove you. And that's really fantastic.
Yeah. And it is a kind of certainty that you get. And I have it now. I mean, but you can use it in a good way. You don't have to let it go to your head. But it's the same way with our Feeling Good app. I'm sure there's nothing in the world that's going to be able to compete with that. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the outcomes with the thousands of apps, they're all pathetic. So, I hate to say it, but it's true. And we're developing something really beautiful that really does help people. But you can do that without thinking that's going to make you special or better than anyone else. You can feel grateful to be a part of a research team. Again, I'm just babbling incoherently.
Well,
I like your incoherent babbling, David. I wanted to go back to one step to the idea of manipulation, that because I still think that's a confusing concept. You said that you didn't get it until a few weeks ago or something, where someone was trying to use you. And that idea of being manipulated has something to do with the like treating someone like an object.
Yeah.
Right. That they're, it's the sort of I-it relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
Versus an I-thou relationship.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I just wanted to.
And that was that early theologian, Martin Buber, came up with that.
Martin Buber, that's who came up with that. You introduced me to that concept.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, can I go back to one other thing? Like you said, working with a narcissist, use a lot of stroking and disarming, and they set the agenda.
Yeah.
And if the therapist thinks that we know better than they do, if we're imposing our agenda, then that's a recipe for disaster. And that, I just want to bring that back to the team model. And that's the antithesis of the team model, thinking that we know better than they do. I mean, the entire, setting the agenda with the patient, leading the journey. That's what team therapy is really all about. So team therapy, it seems like, would be, providing empathy, stroking, disarming, letting the patient set the agenda. Team therapy would be a really great avenue for working with somebody who has narcissism.
Oh, yeah. Traits. Yeah. And so like my Benny story is one of my most powerful stories. And I won't repeat it, but it was this guy at our hospital in Philadelphia, and he was a gang member, and he was a kind of a hitman type of person, and he had a huge, huge ego, and he was a violent, dangerous guy. And then during one of the groups, we had this free cognitive therapy program for we had an inner city hospital, and our neighborhood was a dangerous place, and he came in for heroin addiction or cocaine addiction or suicidal urges. But during one of the groups, he was threatening me, but I treated him with a lot of warmth and respect. And then we did a cost benefit analysis, and I showed all of the advantages of him, with the lifestyle that he was leading, that, he got unlimited money and unlimited sex, and he was the big man in the neighborhood, and blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of it, I said, Benny, I don't see any reason why you should change. This is working for you. And I really saw it. And I couldn't think of any reason that he should change. At that moment, I became Benny. Mm. And then he talked about watching his grandfather commit suicide with a sawed-off shotgun, and started sobbing and just opened himself up to the group. But it was like being on his side. Mm-hmm. Rather than, trying to change him or, trying to do battle with him because of all of his problems and habits. And it's such a joy to be able to do that, to accept somebody and to see the world through their eyes, when everyone else is trying to change him. And the moment I stopped trying to do that and just showed respect and admiration, because I thought he was a cool guy. And when he saw that that's where I was coming from, he allowed himself to be humble and to sob and to talk about his inadequacies. And that's what I meant. It's, you get back what you put out, and if you put out warmth and respect, you have an excellent chance of getting that back. I'm just babbling again.
No, I love what you're saying. Go, Matt.
And it ties into do you think, David, that trauma that he experienced was, in some way formative or shaped him more, and he was more narcissistic as a result of that, or do you?
I have no idea.
Okay.
You can speculate about these things. One of the things I've learned from our app is we do beta tests all the time, and we got data, and I create mathematical models to analyze the data. And I find out that virtually all of my ideas are wrong. The computer shoots me down. And he says, "This model you've made, David, it sucks. It can't be true." Yeah, and then I have to change it. And then suddenly I figure out what the computer's trying to tell me, and it's like a eureka kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really easy to be glib and to want to know the causes of things. And I think we don't know the causes of things. And it might be 100% genetic, for example. Mm-hmm. But I think that societal influence in adulthood, that's very real. The pressure on rock stars and on, movie stars and sports
even
heroes.
Business people.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That the culture is designed to kind of push people into becoming as narcissistic as possible. And I think that's a genuine causal effect. But I don't know, in childhood, maybe it's a horrible thing like that, or maybe it's like what you said. Your parents tell you how special you are. Well, those are opposites, theories about narcissism, and probably neither one of them has much truth if we had a good database to test these things. I just plead agnostic to knowing the causes of things, because we don't know the causes of most things yet. And we'll find out. Like, I found out something on 60 Minutes that blew my mind just on Sunday about dogs. Did you see what it was? How
No.
Why dogs evolved from wolves?
No,
it's because of certain genetic mutation that occurred as a result of the friendliest wolves came to humans and got food and they got a competitive advantage, and they married each other, and over 80 years I think then wolves evolved into dogs, which was completely different. But they found the gene, that there's these friendliness genes that dogs have.
Wow. And
it's the same that some humans have. And there's a syndrome of this Williamson syndrome, where people with the same genes that dogs have are exceptionally friendly, and they think that that's why the human race evolved. There were 3 or 4 races of human beings originally, and we're the only one that survived. And they were speculating maybe it's because we had more of that friendliness gene, so we got together and bonded and formed tribal groups and things that were more efficient. But it's all just kind of speculation. But one day, genetics will answer questions like that about narcissism and other things. All we can say now is we don't know.
But I wonder also if it's cultural. Like, I'm thinking of a country like Nepal that's based in Buddhism, or Bhutan, where they're really focused on providing service to other people and making sure that everyone in their community is happy. And are there less narcissists in that culture because they're focused on the other instead of on themselves?
Yes, and that too could be genetic. And see, that could lead to genetic selective breeding that gets that other focus, within the culture.
Interesting.
So the genes and the culture there can be interplay there, but I'm not an expert. We'd have to get Mark Noble on, who's a geneticist, and explain about those things. Did we cover all the bases, Matt? And
Matt, you're looking very thoughtful.
I had one other concept I wanted to bring into play here is that when treating depression, sometimes people will put up some resistance along the lines of, like, I don't want to become a narcissist. Like, that they have some belief that they need to be self-critical and put themselves down, humble, because they don't want to become some terrible narcissist. And then there's, I think, an interesting paradox there too, which is that the idea that I should be better is itself somewhat narcissistic, and that we can defeat the thought I should be better by just, why should I be better, right? And accept our flawed and kind of screwed up self just the way it is, and that's even less narcissistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to bring that out. Do you think there's a link between depression and or narcissism and other mental illness, like substance use, or some sense of entitlement, like, I deserve this special experience or something like that?
Yeah, or I should be special, and I can't be happy if I'm not special, and if I haven't achieved a lot, and things like that. That's more of a drive toward narcissism that causes depression, and acceptance is the enlightenment. But people don't want to accept themselves because it seems like giving up on this wonderful vision of achieving enough and becoming perfect and becoming special. That's more the way I see it. But I do agree with you that acceptance is something we fight against, but it's really kind of the key to recovery and enlightenment.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Beautifully said, and hard to achieve. I mean, like what you said, Matt, accepting our flawed self. That's not what we're taught when we're growing up.
Right.
Like, push yourself harder.
Yeah.
Try to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom said, if you don't blow your horn, no one else is going to blow it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, gosh, I better be a little bit more proud then.
But maybe that's the highest level of like a God realm, where we're accepting our flawed self and we don't really need to be any better, and we just love ourselves for who we are.
Yeah, that's the message that we're trying to impart to our patients, but it's so hard because there's intense resistance. And I'm working on a class for the Feeling Good app right now on acceptance and all the reasons not to accept yourself, and developing some techniques to try to antidote that. I can't wait to get it out and get it tested and see if it's effective for people. I think it'll be pretty cool if it works, if it's effective.
Nice.
That's very exciting.
Very. Well, I think we've been on the podcast about an hour. Do you have any
We're
other
halfway
things?
Done then.
Do you have any closing remarks, Matt and David?
I've just really enjoyed the conversation. I hope it reaches some people and is useful, and just good spending time with you, Rhonda and David. Thank you so much for having me back on the program.
That's how I feel too, that I'm just grateful every time I see you, Matt, and hang out, and I just love you, and I love you too, Rhonda. It's just such a wonderful treat that we all have to be able to hang out like this, and to think that somebody might pay attention to our thinking and what we're saying and find it beneficial. That's just really, really phenomenal. When we were little, we used to make a fort under the outdoor stairway, put a blanket over it, and we'd get in there and play, and that would be our special place. Did you guys ever do stuff like that?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just like the same thing. That's all we're doing. I mean, we're bullshitting, right? I don't know any crap. We're just spouting stuff out of our heads. So it's like we're under the stairs here doing our thing, and it's just really special.
It is special.
It is. I'm going to bring my blanket next time.
Yeah, cool.
I know whenever I'm with you guys, I always feel like I have to pinch myself to make sure I'm not dreaming, because it's just such a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful being with you.
Okay, then. See you next time.
Okay, till next time.
All right,
Bye,
bye-bye.
everybody.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.